I want to bring in Democratic Senator Alyssa Slotkin of Michigan. She's a member of the Armed Services Committee and one of those 6 Democratic lawmakers who made the video urging the men and women of the military not to accept or follow unlawful orders. I believe we found that video among some of the things that your social media platforms recirculated. And I wonder what you think changed.
I think one of the hallmarks of our time right now in Washington is that a lot of people just don't have a center of gravity, right? I think they don't have a standard set opinion on something. They have an opinion if the other team did something. And, hearing Pete Hegseth from 2016, I was actually heartened to hear him say that. But fast forward less than a decade, and here he is saying the exact opposite thing and repeating what the president is saying. So I just think that there's no center of gravity for these folks. They don't have ideological certainty about things. They don't call balls and strikes on whether you're a Democrat or Republican. If it's against Democrats, they're against it. I mean, they're for it. And if it's their own team doing something, then they have a completely different opinion.
Did the Washington Post story and the Hegseth and Trump reaction to it make their furious reaction to the video you and 5 other lawmakers released, simply telling the men and women of the military not to follow any orders that are unlawful or illegal? Did it add up once that Post story broke?
Well, certainly, we made this video. We had made other videos before on other topics. No one expected one sentence taken from the Uniform Code of Military Justice to set off to hit that kind of nerve with the president and the Secretary of Defense. I think we saw a really outsized reaction, and it was sort of like, you're protesting a little too much. The funniest commentary I saw, I think, on TV was someone said, if you walk into a crowded bar and someone yells, "Hey, ugly," and you turn around, you might be ugly. It really was sort of a striking response. And then the story coming out a few days later, we didn't have foreknowledge of that story, but clearly they must have known it was in the ether. Clearly they're sensitive about these strikes. The president is walking away saying, I wasn't involved. I didn't support that second follow-on strike, the double tap strike. Pete Hegseth has changed his story, so they're clearly sensitive about it. But again, I think particularly when you see that when there's a different president in office, Pete Hegseth is happy to talk about the ethos of the military, which is true. You swear an oath to the Constitution and not to any one president. It just sort of made it a little bit more clear why they reacted so strongly.
Did you have reason to suspect that they had issued illegal orders before you made the video?
Well, we made the video because we were all separately getting so much outreach, frankly, for the better part of a year, but certainly this fall, from folks in uniform, from new veterans, from folks in the intelligence community who were saying, look, I'm worried I'm going to be asked to do something illegal, especially, frankly, troops in our streets and our cities. I think there was a lot of concern about that. But then since early September, a lot of concern from people at Southcom, people in the chain of command, people seeing purges of general officers who were involved in those operations, people seeing the JAG officers removed and saying, I'm concerned about this. I don't know, right? So we made that video because the demand signal was very strong. And again, we didn't have foreknowledge of the Washington Post story, but it also doesn't surprise me that those stories are now surfacing.
Let me ask you to just take us through, it feels like if you are in the military or you're a military spouse or family, it is the worst thing you can say about a man or woman serving their country to accuse them of a war crime. Can you explain to us why the second strike would constitute a war crime?
Well, look, I think we need to know more information. I'm not willing to say because I haven't seen the video. We don't have transparency and accountability from Pete Hegseth. We don't know exactly what happened, and there's a lot of confusing information. But I do think that, there are things like the law of war, which have been around for a very long time. which guide our military and all other militaries of democracies, that are a set of standards. And particularly, again, if the facts bear out this way, that folks were, obviously in the water, they were no longer a threat, then there are real concerns I have about the law of war and whether it violated that. But I think, to be honest, we are, what to me, as someone who's worked alongside the military my entire career, I never want American citizens thinking, and questioning their military. I want them to feel confident that this is the best fighting force in the world and they uphold a set of standards. And to me, leadership comes from the top. I need to know that the leaders of the Department of Defense are upholding a standard and that we can feel good about as Americans. So I think the details, I'm just not going to say what the details are when I don't know them, but we want to make sure we're upholding a very high standard as the American military.
The Washington Post reports about a missile being launched off of the coast of Trinidad and setting the vessel on fire from bow to stern. And then on the video, the live feed, which Pete Hegseth said he was watching and now says he wasn't watching, that there were 2 people seen alive, and a shock went through the room from the people that were watching. In your experience on the intelligence side of being in country during operations, how many people more or less would have access to the recorded video of that operation?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's lots of communications that go on when you're talking about operations, right? There's a ton of operational ways that we retain information. Video is one. I honestly, I do not know how many people have access to that video. Obviously, they put it out into the media, or a part of it. And so I think there's lots of folks, even in the public affairs department, who have had access to that video. It exists and it's around, but there are other ways. There are chats that go on, operational chats that we want to have happen when things like this go on. So there's lots of different ways. I think the most important thing, though, is, the Secretary of Defense, any Secretary of Defense, is really the buck stops with him. And I've seen secretaries of defense under Democratic administrations and Republican administrations. Lots of stuff happens that a secretary of defense doesn't like or doesn't know about always. But you got to take accountability. You got to say, here, look, this is what happened. I want to be transparent, and here's what we're going to do to change or to improve or to make it, better. That's what we're asking for. Come and have a hearing, sit down in front of the American people and explain the situation. And I think that's what's hard for a lot of people, is watching the secretary now turn and blame it on the uniformed military, back away from statements he himself has made. It's like, clearly the buck doesn't stop with him, and that's been a theme for this secretary.
Do you have confidence, though, that all the evidence that does exist about an operation where people have said, I mean, Hegseth himself has said he was watching it, so we know that there is, to your point, at a minimum, there is video, there are recording, there are records. Do you have confidence that all those will be preserved so that bipartisan senators and members of the House committees that want to investigate this will have access to the truth?
I mean, look, I think I know, working alongside the military my entire career, that there are wonderful people who care deeply about the reputation of the military, who care deeply about the values that it represents, who take their oath seriously. And I think that those folks know that there's got to be a responsible way of handling these documents. So I don't have any reason to believe things are being destroyed. But again, leadership climate is set at the top. So the Secretary of Defense has a responsibility to just provide some transparency here. Just own it. And let's have the conversation so the American people feel confident in what's happening in their name.
It's been a terrible 72 hours for Pete Hegseth. The Inspector General at the Pentagon reportedly has found that he jeopardized operations by putting that information into an insecure channel in the Signal chat. I read some of the messages. The Inspector General also found that they were clearly classified at the time. Have you seen the full report, and do you have, I mean, concern seems like the wrong question, but do you have new understanding of his conduct around the Signal chat scandal?
Yeah, I'm actually going right from this interview to my time in the skiff to read the report and actually have some time with it. So I'll have more to say once I've actually read it. But I mean, again, I think that just what was already released back when the whole Signalgate thing happened, it's not hard to understand for anyone. I'm talking about anyone associated with military operations, including the spouse community. They know that you do not put the time and location of strikes in any kind of unclassified space, even on Signal, right? And like the spouse community knows, you know, if you get a call from somebody and, you know, a loved one, and they tell you where they are or where they're going or what time something is going down, you don't put that on Facebook. You don't talk to anyone about that. That shouldn't even be conveyed sometimes. So I think it's like basic common knowledge that you don't put time, location of sensitive operations that put our uniformed military at risk on the open internet, period. So I want to read the report, but that in itself is already obvious to anyone who's ever been involved in these kinds of things.
I know that seems much more important than this, but I want to ask you one last question. I know you've shared some of the threats that you've received. Do you and your staff and your family feel safe?
Yeah, I mean, even just coming to this interview, I've got 24/7 security, you know, which no one likes to have, that the Capitol Police is providing. We had a bomb threat at my home. We had a suspicious package the next day. My family has been targeted, so they've got law enforcement help, and our local law enforcement have been incredible in helping, supporting our family. But I think I think most Americans believe that we shouldn't be threatening death to someone because we disagree with them. And when it comes from the commander-in-chief, when it comes from the president of the United States, we shouldn't be surprised when hundreds, if not thousands at this point, of threats come in saying what he said, that we should be hung, and worse. And I just don't think this represents who we are as a country. I don't think anyone really wants our politics to be handled this way. And I would never wish this on someone, even if I disagreed vociferously with their political position. I would never wish violence on someone else. So I just, look, it's an unfortunate part of this job. For me, you know, I signed up for this. My family and my staff did not.
Senator Slotkin, thank you for your candor. Thank you for your role in all this, and thank you for talking to us about it. It's great to see you.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Nicole.